Chapter 12:16 The Angel. The huge underground world. The purple squares were still functioning as usual, except that above the tall pyramid, the alcove where the crystals were placed was empty. The white snake returned here after taking care of the small reaper of love that Zongyue had left behind. He stepped into the air, his bare feet on the platform at the top of the pyramid. Seeing the vacancy that appeared, he frowned somewhat impatiently. However, soon after, he raised his right hand, and an identical purple crystal appeared out of nowhere in the middle of his palm, which he inserted on top of the groove. "Why don't you let me kill them?" White Snake didn't open his mouth, but was expressing his thoughts with his mind to someone. Soon, an ancient and deep realization resounded in his mind. "Spare them, White Dragon. After all, we are their angels, and angels are not allowed to kill their guardians." White Snake's name was White Dragon. Hearing Ancient Will's statement, he sneered contemptuously. "What age is it, and you're still clinging to ancient rules? Have you forgotten how long it has been since we received the will of Kagato?" Ancient Will said, "No matter how many long years have passed, we should never forget our duty. That is the root of why we have survived to this day. We cannot take the risk of desecrating Kagato's will. Besides, it was just a spirit of sacrifice." Hearing this, White Dragon said coldly, "A single spirit of sacrifice would take us a long time to collect. I was already annoyed when I had a portion of it stolen by those two worms earlier." Ancient Will's voice carried a few chuckles. That itself was obtained from the human race, letting them take a portion of it is nothing. What's more, when that day comes, perhaps we need to utilize their power. White Dragon's face became a bit more icy, and his gaze took on a bit of gravity. "The day of the fall. Is it?" He raised his head to look into the sky, vaguely looking through the tens of thousands of meters of rock layers to the human communities on the surface. Zhang Yi left the abyss with everyone. After arriving on top of the land, feeling the bitter cold wind outside and looking at the endless blanket of snow, a feeling of warmth and safety unexpectedly arose in his heart. Compared to the cold surface, the unknown and terrifying underground world was what made people more afraid. The greatest fear still came from the unknown. This experience had shocked him so much that all his previous worldviews had been turned upside down. Zhang Yi came to the surface before receiving the signals transmitted by Zongyue. The others had already rushed to Snow Dragon City by train, and they knew that Zhang Yi possessed the ability of space shuffle, so they did not wait for him. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, his heart was still quite shaken at this moment, and the inside of his brain was in chaos. Without saying anything more, he quickly left this place and rushed towards the direction of Snow Dragon City. A dozen kilometers away from Snow Dragon City, Zhang Yi chose to stop. He found an abandoned high-rise where he stopped to rest. It wasn't until after he stepped his feet on the dusty concrete floor that he felt his heart beating so fast that his body was trembling slightly. Zhang Yi had everyone come out from inside Spirit Guardian's shadow space. Apart from Liang Yu and Flower who were recuperating from their injuries, everyone else came next to Zhang Yi, and all of them were looking at each other at this moment. Their state was no better than Zhang Yi. Inside shadow space, everything Zhang Yi saw, they were able to see. Therefore, the shock inside was no less than Zhang Yi. Only Yang Xinxin had the calmest expression. Her IQ was so high that her mind was hardly affected. Emotional fluctuations were not able to help solve problems. Instead, it was Totoro who had been naive, looking at Zhang Yi with a smile on his face, looking like he was inviting credit. Zhang Yi pulled out his favorite snacks from dimensional space and threw them over, and Totoro immediately hugged a pile of snacks and nibbled on them. Zhang Yi looked at it and became more and more certain that the Totoro was from the underground world. Moreover, the abyss in Star Island's Misty Valley was very similar to the abyss under the Qinling Mountain. Zhang Yi took a few deep breaths as he removed his mask and let the cold wind from the north blow over his head, instantly sobering up. It's still the same old story, absolutely no one is allowed to say anything about what happened underground today. Zhang Yi coldly looked at Fatty Su, especially you, keep your mouth shut when you're with that Li Yan. Zhang Yi had obtained a purple crystal, although it was still unclear what that thing was for, but judging by the size of that huge purple square formation and the attitude of the Xinjiang region's laborious layout, its value was hard to estimate. At the very least, the value was not below the source of God. The others did not know that he had obtained the purple crystal, and in case the other regions learned of it, Zhang Yi was afraid that they would all face no small amount of trouble. Therefore, it was necessary to keep a tight lid on this news. Fatty Su nodded his head like garlic. "Don't worry, boss, I have a number in my heart, I won't say anything that I shouldn't." "It better be," Zhang Yi said. Just at this time, Auntie Zhou Jaime's face revealed a worried look. "But what the hell is that? It started off as a snake and then turned humanoid. Could it be a snake demon? Can there really be demons in this world?" These words spoke the minds of many people. Animals changing into human form originally only existed in myths or novels. But seeing the scene of White Snake's transformation with their own eyes made them begin to doubt the reality of this world. Who knows? It has become a messy world. Yang Xinxin spoke. "What's certain now is that in the huge underground world that we don't know about, there is indeed a civilization that is different from humans. I even think that they possess a longer history than us. There's also an even more terrifying speculation that they are the gods of our legends." The crowd looked at Yang Xinxin, waiting for her explanation. Yang Xinxin was well-read and had a superior IQ, knowing many things that normal people did not understand. Yang Xinxin continued, "Among the legends around the world, there exist images of gods with human heads and snake bodies. For example, inside the ancient legends of Huashu Kingdom, the human ancestors Nuwa and Fuxi are human-headed and snake-bodied. That's why I suspect that the existences we saw underground are races that were regarded as gods in ancient times." This explanation was more reasonable, and Zhang Yi had also heard such claims on various mystery programs. Many people believe that humans were not the first civilization in this world. Even many experts believe that there had been multiple generations of civilizations in the world before humans appeared. The image of the giant creature in Misty Valley flickered in Zhang Yi's mind. He frowned, "But it doesn't feel the same. The fellow I saw in Misty Valley and that child transformed into a white snake don't give me the same kind of feeling." Chapter 12:17 Settling Accounts. The white dragon child was a snake-headed white snake in human form. However, that monster in Misty Valley had human-like limbs, a huge body size, and a long tail. This was clearly inconsistent with the image of a human head and snake body. Uncle Yu hugged his arms, his brows knitted together. He asked in puzzlement, "If they are really the divine race we worshipped in the ancient times, yet why did they slowly disappear from the midst of history? And hidden into the ground?" Zhang Yi said, "Could it have something to do with this apocalyptic disaster?" When these words came out, everyone was as enlightened as if they had been enlightened. The divine race entered the underground world to take refuge? Yang Xinxin said in a clear and cold voice, "That doesn't make sense." She explained to the crowd, "We've already seen their formidable strength, as well as the kind of technological ability that surpasses the human level. If they were able to foresee the coming of the end times in advance, they would have been able to cope with it completely." She opened her hands, "Not to mention them, if we humans can predict the coming of this disaster 20 years in advance, we have the means to let most people survive." The crowd spoke up, saying what was in their hearts. Zhang Yi rubbed his forehead. "This question, unless we can communicate with the existence of the underground world, I'm afraid it will be difficult to get an answer. Forget it, we'll consider this question later. Let's go back first. I believe that Xinjiang's side must have relevant information. This kind of occult field must have information recorded on the national side. If they could get the information from Xinjiang for research, it would also be convenient for Zhang Yi to understand this world more clearly. But for now, I have to settle this score with them first." The corner of Zhang Yi's mouth curled up in a meaningful arc. Although this trip to the underground had been the most rewarding for him. Not only had he unearthed a large number of Yuan stone veins, but he had also obtained the mysterious purple crystal. But he had to pretend to be very angry as a disguise. Not to mention the fact that it was the Xinjiang side that had utilized him in the first place, it was only right for Zhang Yi to claim the benefits. However, he still told Yang Xinqin and Zhou Qi and the others to study the historical information after they returned. Especially those myths as well as knowledge related to the underground world, investigate them properly. The crowd returned to Spirit Guardian's shadow space, and Zhang Yi adjusted his emotions at this time before advancing towards Snow Dragon City. At this time in Snow Dragon City, the mutant teams from all the major powers had all immediately started to heal their wounds upon their return. Several Epsilons were heavily injured. Under White Dragon's means of attack, they did not have the slightest resistance. Fortunately, the medical means were developed and there were still medical-type mutants present, so physical injuries could be healed quickly. Even if there were serious injuries of broken arms and legs, they were able to realize the rebirth of broken limbs. However, after this battle, both the Northwest region and Northeast region's Epsilon were extremely angry in their hearts. Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua couldn't mention how angry they were inside. They had thought that they were simply rounding up two xenomorphs, only to realize that they had been used as a gun. If Zhang Yi hadn't utilized his ability to take them away in the end, they would have basically died underground. Especially Li Changgong, after he learned about the news of Sky War God Qinglanlan's disappearance, not to mention how much it hurt him inside. Qinglanlan and him didn't have an ordinary relationship, besides being his subordinate, she was his lover. Qinglanlan disappeared in such a dangerous place, it was almost certain that she had died in battle. Qinglanlan's death was also counted by Li Changgong on the head of Xinjiang region. This was a score that they would definitely seek out Xinjiang region to settle. Zhang Yi rushed to Snow Dragon City, a gloomy look of anger written all over his face. The medical team from Dragon's Roar Guardians came over to help treat him, but they were also coldly rejected by him. Zhang Yi's body had no injuries, and he directly rushed to where Zhong Yue was with a roar, "Jin Yuanzi, get the hell out of here." A group of Dragon's Roar Guardians stood in front of Zhang Yi and looked at each other. They didn't have the guts to face the wrath of an Epsilon, and were only able to speak out to dissuade him. "Lord Chaos, there is something to discuss. Lord Xinhua is still receiving treatment, can you wait until he's finished before coming over to discuss?" Zhang Yi did not even look at them. At times like this, the angrier he acted, the more normal it would be, otherwise people would become suspicious and think that he had gotten a huge favor. And at this moment, Zhong Yue, who was still healing his wounds, heard this voice and slowly closed his eyes, letting out a helpless bitter smile. He unplugged the tubes inserted in his body and walked out of the doors under the care of several medical mutants. Zhang Yi coldly stared at Zhong Yue and sneered, "Jin Yuanzi, aren't you going to give us an explanation for this matter today?" Zhong Yue knew he was guilty and sighed as he lowered his head. "This matter is something that we in Xinjiang did wrong, but in the beginning, we didn't expect it to become what it is now." Zhang Yi laughed coldly, "This is not a reason for you to put us in danger. Do you know that, just a little bit closer, we would have all died there?" Zhang Yi's side made a commotion, and Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua, who were not far apart, also brought their men and rushed over angrily. As Epsilon, although they were severely injured, their movements were unhindered. The three came over and joined forces to pressure Zhong Yue. Li Changgong gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot, "We came in good faith to help you solve your problems, but we ended up getting screwed over by you. It also caused the tragic death of my beloved general, you must give a reasonable explanation for this matter. Otherwise..." He hadn't finished his words, but the threat in his words was self-evident. Even if it was Xinjiang region, it was impossible to bully people like this. The anger of the three regions at this time was not something they were willing to endure either. Zhong Yue said, "Everyone, we didn't expect all of this. If I really wanted to harm you all, why would I have traveled with you?" Once these words came out, the ferocious look on the three people's faces slightly eased. Zhong Yue was also extremely injured, and it was clear that the dangers of the underground world were something he hadn't anticipated. Han Shanzhua clenched his mouth full of silver teeth, "Don't shirk your responsibility here. No matter what, it's an indisputable fact that we almost died in the underground. You Xinjiang must give our three regions a reasonable explanation." With things having come to this, the crowd was only able to fight for some compensation. It was good that there weren't too many casualties to really fall apart. Zhong Yue invited the trio inside the room and said with a good attitude as he admitted his mistake, "This incident was out of our expectations, we will make up for the losses of a few of you." Seeing Zhong Yue's attitude, Zhang Yi's trio did not continue to be more aggressive. Zhang Yi sipped his hot tea and asked indifferently, "Zhen Yuanzi, tell us. What exactly did you guys find in the underground world? After utilizing us, at least tell us the truth of the matter." Chapter 12-18 Unspeakable History. Zhong Yue didn't dare to hide anything from the representatives of the three regions at this time. After all, he was the one who was in the wrong. So he told the truth about that day, what he saw and heard when he entered the underground. "It's true that I discovered the existence of the underground world a long time ago, but that time I only hurriedly glimpsed it and entered there in the middle of chasing the Earth Centipede. The Earth Centipede at that time was nowhere near as strong as it is now, yet it could quickly become stronger by stealing the power of the purple crystal. But the commotion wasn't as big before, and I didn't encounter the child that was transformed by that white snake." The corners of Zhong Yue's mouth were a little bitter. "That's why I thought that it was the nest of the Earth Centipede clan, and as long as I was able to kill the two Earth Centipedes, I would be able to take that mysterious purple crystal." When the crowd heard this and then looked at Zhong Yue's severely injured body, they understood most of it in their hearts. Zhong Yue had misjudged his opponent, which had caused himself to be almost killed by White Dragon's sword as well. "Though the words are like that, but on what basis do you make us believe?" Zhang Yi spoke slowly. "Your Xinjiang region has been operating the Qinling Mountain for more than a year. Do you really know nothing about what exists underground? Not to mention that the information in your hands is far more than ours." Zhong Yue laughed bitterly. "Do you really think that we hold as much information in our hands?" He spoke his inner thoughts as if he was complaining. The three epsilons of the Xinjiang region each have their own duties, and the Xidagarba king guards the capital city and may not leave without authorization. Hotu is the bottom of the Xinjiang region and lives deep in the Earth God's temple all year round. I'm the only one who guards Ghost Valley, fully responsible for developing the Yuanstone veins. And those two epsilon-level Earth Centipedes are my biggest trouble. How am I capable of crossing over their colony to explore deep underground? If they hadn't been unable to adapt to the environment above ground, I'm afraid we would have lost the right to exploit the Yuanstone vein a long time ago." When Zhang Yi heard these words, an aura suddenly flashed in the middle of his mind. Earth Centipede couldn't adapt to the environment on the surface? Then the White Dragon had been living underground for a long time, so it would definitely be difficult to adapt if it came to the surface as well. Thinking back to the black armored monster in the Misty Valley. Perhaps the reason why these underground creatures hadn't clashed with humans was because the difference between the environments in which the two existed was too great. It was as if it was difficult for humans to clash with creatures 10,000 meters deep under the sea. The difference in the survival environment led to the need for competition between the two without too much conflict in the resources they needed to survive. But the arrival of the end times seems to have quietly changed all this. And what was the biggest change, exactly? Zhang Yi frowned and fell into thought. On the other hand, Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua were pressing forward, demanding that Xinjiang region must give sufficient compensation. Moreover, they were clearly curious about the underground world as well, and they also demanded that Xinjiang hand over the research materials in their hands. Zhong Yue, for their demand for compensation, said that this matter he also cannot do the master, but Qin Qigong will give them a satisfactory answer. As for the so-called information well, he laughed bitterly. Your memory doesn't seem to be very good, forgetting that history from years ago. Much of the information for occult research was burned in the middle of those years. Nowadays, if we want to look for many records from the ancient period, we even need to go borrow transcripts from other countries. The three Zhang Yi looked at each other, relatively speechless. If they wanted to explore information about those mysterious underground creatures, they had to look for traces from amongst the history of ancient times. However, the history of Huashu Kingdom did have a large number of gaps among the many calamities. That afternoon, Zhang Yi and the other four chatted for a long time, but they only wanted Xinjiang region to make more compensation to make up for their losses. In addition, there was also the issue of how to distribute the origin they had obtained from killing the two xenomorphs. The origin of the Centipede Queen, as well as half of the Centipede King's origin, did not contain much difference in energy in comparison. Zhong Yue had long indicated that he would give up the fight for the origin, but also because what he had planned for was greater, the purple crystals in the middle of the square formation. Although his purpose was now defeated, he could only consider himself unlucky. Not only did he not have a share of the xenomorph origin, but Xinjiang also needed to take other resources as compensation. This matter Xinjiang's side got the news early. Qin Qigong let them return to Xinjiang, and then do a detailed discussion. There are a lot of places to talk about, not enough to recount them all. Ghost Valley there, naturally also sent a lot of Dragon's Roar guardians, watching from afar. What they were worried about was not the Earth Centipede, but the presence of the underground world that had been startled. Zhang Yi's heart was even clearer. Totoro had stolen a copy of the purple crystal. It was hard to say if White Dragon would rush out to find him in trouble. Fortunately, after half a day had passed, there was no movement there, which made Zhang Yi feel much more at ease. Zhang Yi left Zhong Yue's place. Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua followed him to the left and right, persuading Zhang Yi one by one to reach a united front with them and not to let go easily. Li Changgong said, "This time, we must advance and retreat together. No one can compromise early. Only then will we be able to get the most out of it." Han Shanzhua also said, "Both of those origins are in your hands. How we divide them will be discussed later. But for now, we must work together and properly bleed the old boy from Xinjiang." As they spoke, both of them gritted their teeth. After all, at a status position like theirs, it was absolutely difficult to endure being hoodwinked. Zhang Yi nodded. "All right, then we'll do as you say." Vaguely, the duo's attitude towards him had become much more respectful. There was no lack of Zhang Yi's kindness in saving their lives, noting that on this trip underground, without Zhang Yi's escape skills, they were afraid that they wouldn't even be able to get past the foreign bugs. However, more importantly, Zhang Yi's powerful strength had gained their respect. Zhang Yi returned to the resting area of the people in Jiangnan region. They had discussed a temporary rest today to heal the injured mutants and also let the big guys rest and relax, so they would move back to Xinjiang City tomorrow. When going back, Zhang Yi saw an intimate couple sitting under the eaves. Well, I don't know whether it is appropriate or not to say this. However, Fatty Su and Li Yang were holding hands, and their eyes were so affectionate that their eyes were about to hook out of the gravy. Zhang Yi's eyes fell on Li Yang's body. Her eyes were gentle like a pool of spring water. As for Fatty Su, his face was also full of infatuation, and he was almost dumbfounded. Zhang Yi recalled what he had heard from Fatty Su and the others. In the middle of the abyss they had encountered danger several times, and it was Li Yang who came to their rescue. After a bloody battle, it made Fatty Su and Li Yang's feelings for each other rise dramatically. Even Deng Shintong and Uncle Yu had a good opinion of Li Yang. Although it sounds ridiculous, I can feel that she's serious about Fatty Su. Deng Shintong, a veteran of love affairs, said as such to Zhang Yi. Chapter 12:19 Pain, Too Much Pain. Zhang Yi did not approach them, but stood still at a distance. After bowing his head and thinking for a long time, he sighed softly. Ugh. However, there are some things that a long pain is better than a short pain, and the current state of Fatty Su and Li Yang was also the time to get things out of the way. It was up to Fatty Su to choose. Ahem. He coughed loudly twice, instantly attracting the attention of the two in the mushy mood. Li Yang blushed slightly. Your Excellency Chaos. Fatty Su hemmed and hawed, scratching his head in embarrassment. Boss, you're back. Zhang Yi shouted towards Fatty Su. Fatty Su, come over here. I have something to say to you. Fatty Su gave Li Yang a reassuring look before running to Zhang Yi with a determined gaze. Old boss. He took a deep breath as if he had made some sort of determination. I want to be with Yang. I'm in love with her. Zhang Yi stared at Fatty Su and took a deep breath. Thought about it? You want to stay in Xinjiang, right? Fatty Su shook his head. Boss, I won't leave you. Can you help me ask for someone from the top of Xinjiang? There was a somewhat embarrassed expression on his face. Liang Yang was a member of the Dragon's Roar Guardians, and her strength was extraordinary. Under normal circumstances, it would be difficult for Zhang Yi to want someone. After all, it wasn't easy for people to raise a powerful Dragon's Roar Guardian. But right now, the Xinjiang region was ashamed of Zhang Yi, and it wasn't hard to take the opportunity to make a request for them to agree. Fatty Su was quite smart, but he didn't know if this was something Liang Yang had taught him. Zhang Yi nodded. Well, good. As soon as you decide, I'll go and ask for someone. He answered without the slightest bit of hesitation, which caused Fatty Su, who had originally thought he was going to be scolded, to freeze. Huh. Zhang Yi said indifferently, as long as you think it over and want to be with her, I have no problem with it. And I will try my best to help you realize your happiness. As Zhang Yi said this, the corners of his mouth tried their best to control themselves from laughing out. Fatty Su jumped up in excitement. Boss, boss. You're really too good to me. Righteous Father, please accept my child's obeisance. Zhang Yi helped up Fatty Su, who was about to kneel down and kiss his boots. Don't be in a hurry, there are a few words I need to talk to her about. You call her over. Fatty Su was thrilled in his heart and said smilingly when he heard this, that's the right thing to do, after all, she'll have to call out to your brother along with me in the future. Fatty Su hurriedly went over and called Liang Yang over. Liang Yang looked at Zhang Yi with a few nervous looks in her eyes. Zhang Yi waved his hand towards Fatty Su. You go to the side first, I'll have a chat with her. Fatty Su reluctantly walked to the distance, but his eyes were always fixed on this place. He was afraid that Zhang Yi would agree to the two of them being together on the surface, but behind his back, he would threaten Liang Yang, destroying the happiness of the two of them. Zhang Yi and Liang Yang stood face to face and simply chatted a few words. Liang Yang lowered her head from time to time, raised her head from time to time, and soon her gaze was as resolute as a pilgrimage. I believe in him. Liang Yang said to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi smiled disbelievingly. That would be best, and I also hope that you all can find happiness with each other. So I'll leave this matter to yourselves to decide. Liang Yang nodded seriously. There was light in her eyes. It was a yearning for love. She turned around and walked towards Fatty Su, who was not far away. Fatty Su excitedly reached out to hold Liang Yang's hands. Yang Yang, boss, he agrees that we are together. Are you happy? Liang Yang smiled faintly and nodded. Chunlei, before that, there's something I have to tell you. Fatty Su was slightly stunned. What is it? Liang Yang stared at Fatty Su's chubby face. He was really cute looking. Round and chubby face, cute smile, and the habit of always loving to wear white socks. You said that no matter what I look like, no matter what kind of past I had, you would like me, right? Liang Yang smiled, her eyes fixed on Fatty Su's face. Fatty Su had a puzzled look on his face. Yes. Yang Yang, don't worry, it's your person I like. I won't care about the past. A hint of realization appeared on his face, as if he had seen through everything. What could the worst outcome be? Liang Yang was so beautiful and understood him so well. In fact, Fatty Su had already guessed something about her. It's not you who's wrong, it's the world. I believe that you are also forced by life to do that kind of thing. In the middle of Fatty Su's mind, he had already thought of Liang Yang's gambling father, her sick mom, her young brother, and the broken her. In Liang Yang's eyes, light began to bloom. Thank you, Chunlei. Thank you for being able to understand me. She gently pulled over Fatty Su's hand with a relieved smile. Originally, I was worried about how I would explain to you. But I didn't expect you to be so understanding. The smile on Fatty Su's face grew even thicker as he stared imploringly at the pitiful yet adorable girl in front of him. Deep inside, a sense of pride of having redeemed a fallen princess arose. It was as if it was portrayed in a doggerel romance novel. He became a hero who disregarded the world's eyes, a warrior who truly charged for love. Yang Yang, love, it can surpass everything. Li Yang Yang nodded, thank you, really thank you. She took Fatty Sue's hand and moved closer to her body. I knew that you wouldn't mind. Fatty Sue just wanted to say something, only all of a sudden, his hand that was held over by Li Yang Yang suddenly touched something. Fatty Sue was a bit surprised. The touch was very familiar. After all, he was already an expert level in this area. He lowered his head. Li Yang Yang pulled his hand towards between her legs. No, to be exact, it was between his legs. Li Yang Yang's face blushed. It's so nice to meet you. Fatty Sue's expression froze for a moment. The smile on his face, the smile of love that he thought could embrace all things, froze and disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. The rosy face turned deathly white. In the next moment, Zhang Yi in the distance heard a pig-killing wail ring out. He covered his ears with both hands and silently turned around, unable to suppress the smile at the corner of his mouth. However, at a time like this when people were in the middle of you-know-what, he felt that it seemed impolite for him to laugh out wildly, so he did his best to suppress it. Pwah! Fatty, haven't you ever noticed the knot in his throat? Ha ha! Zhang Yi almost fell to the ground and rolled around laughing. Li Yang Yang was not a girl, but a man. This news was known by asking around a little bit. Zhang Yi also understood from that time onwards why Li Yang Yang would look at Fatty Sue. In their circle, Fatty Sue instead became a very popular presence. Chapter 12:20 Look Away. That day, Fatty Sue recalled the fear of being dominated by Nan Lian. Zhang Yi watched as he ran away with his hands dancing and wailing like he was crazy. His eyes were full of sympathy, but more than that, it was a teasing smile that made Zhang Yi's stomach hurt. Li Yang Yang reached out her hand as if she wanted to retain the crumbling Fatty Sue, but in the end, he just dropped his hand in frustration with a disheveled look on his face. Zhang Yi held back his laughter as he walked over and said, he doesn't seem to accept you that easily. Li Yang Yang bitterly smiled and shook her head, it is indeed not something an average person can accept. Zhang Yi, however, smiled and encouraged, you have to believe in your bond. I think he just can't accept it for the time being, but you guys have been together for so long and have deep feelings for each other. He will figure it out. Li Yang Yang sighed lightly, let's hope so. Zhang Yi reached out and waved goodbye to him, I'll go help you ask him what he really thinks. This guy, why does he only think of escaping when things happen? Be brave and face it. Zhang Yi couldn't hold back the smile at the corner of his mouth, he especially wanted to see Fatty Sue's expression now, it must be extremely wonderful. So Zhang Yi bid farewell to Li Yang Yang, and then chased after Fatty Sue in the direction he fled. After a while, he saw the soulful Fatty Sue behind a rockery. He was squatting on the ground holding his body with a weak, pitiful and helpless look, his eyes were lost in thought and he was mumbling something under his breath. Zhang Yi got close enough to listen before he heard him gibbering, you have such high-speed machinery into Huashu Kingdom, remember the principles I gave. All along the Huanglong River with Bluetooth. Zhang Yi was a little nervous, Fatty Sue, are you not crazy? Fatty Sue heard Zhang Yi's voice and raised his head blankly. Seeing Zhang Yi, he cried out with a wow sound. Boss! I was wrong, I was really wrong. I shouldn't have believed from the beginning that there would be such a beautiful woman who would like me, if I didn't believe him, I wouldn't have been hurt so much. Zhang Yi consoled, you are still mainly not forced to count on your looks, but if you have a bit of counting, there is no way you would think that such a beautiful woman would like you. Unless she just isn't a woman. Pain, too much pain. Fatty Sue cried out in pain, and by now, he was already sniffling. Zhang Yi took half a step back in disgust. You chose the path yourself, and then again, don't all of you two prickly apes love male nymphs? Zhang Yi asked suspiciously. Fatty Sue grunted, boss, you don't understand. Watching male nymphets on the internet is a kind of enjoyment, but actually encountering a male nymphette in reality is a horror movie. Zhang Yi stifled a laugh, ahem, anyway, what I said still counts. As long as you nod your head, I'll immediately go to Xidagarba King to get you someone. You have to think clearly, after this village, there won't be this store anymore. Apart from being a man, he's not bad at all in other aspects. Zhang Yi patted Fatty Su's shoulder and said in a persuasive manner, being a man, the most important thing is to be happy. Sometimes, if you open your eyes and don't care so much, you'll find that life is very pleasant. Fatty Su looked at Zhang Yi with tearful eyes. Boss, you are standing and talking without any pain in your back. So, do you want a male-female or not? Zhang Yi said lightly, it's not like I don't have a wife, why cheapen myself? Ah! Fatty Su hugged his head and cried. Zhang Yi knew that he needed to be quiet and was done watching the fun, so he said, anyway, think it over, the problems on the Xinjiang side are almost dealt with, it won't be long before we have to go back. Give me a reply before you leave. Zhang Yi knew that Fatty Su just couldn't take the blow for a while, so his thoughts were confused. But how he and Li Yangyang will get along in the end depends on his own will. Zhang Yi is not involved. Rather, Zhang Yi quite wanted to see the two of them develop a special romance. This was also a kind of Zhang Yi's bad taste. Fatty Su's eyes were complicated as he fell into deep thought. It seemed that he was really weighing the relationship with Li Yangyang. After all, Li Yangyang was excellent in every aspect except for not being a real woman. She shared a common hobby with him and really liked him, unlike those technicians in Blizzard City who were all just false to him. The next day, Zhang Yi and the others took the airplane back to Xinjiang. On the way, Li Yangyang didn't come up to Fatty Su like he did in the past, but coldly followed inside the Heavenly Constellations group. He didn't even glance towards Zhang Yi's side of the group. Obviously, he was clear that this matter was difficult for Fatty Su, and thus did not dwell on it too much, choosing instead to give Fatty Su time to consider it. This caused Fatty Su to be a bit frustrated, and the tangled look on his face intensified. This scene made Zhang Yi and the others unable to stop laughing. Even Uncle Yu teased Fatty Su, saying, ha ha ha, Chun Lei ah, as long as two people genuinely love each other, it doesn't really matter if it's a man or a woman or whatever. Besides, nowadays, medical technology is so advanced, if it doesn't work, which one of you two will go and do a sex change operation? Zhou Keir smiled as she covered her mouth and said gently, but, if he could do the surgery, he should have gone for it a long time ago. It's not hard to do a sex change operation nowadays. But then, his unique attributes wouldn't exist. She said playfully, a tomboy is meant to be male, and a woman's appearance is only interesting. Isn't it? Fatty Su rubbed his hair hard and sighed long and hard, looking like a complete love wreck. Zhang Yi was just watching the fun from the side. What he said was true, and he would respect Fatty Su no matter what choice he made. After all, it was not a big deal to watch the fun. It didn't take long for them to reach Xinjiang City. Qin Shigong and Shang Daowen personally came over to greet the crowd. After opening the hatch, Zhang Yi, Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua and the other mutants from the three regions looked at the two Xinjiang executives, but their eyes were all cold and indifferent. Qin Shigong knew that he was at a disadvantage, so he kept smiling with them. Immediately afterward, he arranged for them to have an impromptu high-level meeting. The Zhang Yi trio came up for accountability, blaming the Xinjiang region for hiding things from them. Regarding this, Qin Shigong's explanation was exactly the same as Zhong Yue's, saying that they weren't aware of the existence of other communities underground before, thinking that it was a treasure that Earth Centipede had unearthed. Zhang Yi and the three of them simply did not believe that the #1 region of Huashu Kingdom, the capital city that held the most powerful military force and the richest intelligence, would do something so abrupt. If they hadn't been informed of something in advance, where would they do something so out of the ordinary? Zhang Yi's right hand tapped on the table, his eyes burning as he stared at Qin Shigong. Commander Qin, I have always respected you. But this time you almost caused us to die under the ground. This is something we cannot easily forgive.